right. Well, thank you guys for being here on another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast. I'm really excited to have Jenny Roth on the show today. And Jenny and I were just chatting before we hit record that, we've taken a summer hiatus from podcast interviews. We're back, ready to go, have conversations, and get into it as we kind of hit that back to school season. I know this episode is going to air in September. We're recording it in August. And I used to say August is the new January. And I think for a lot of people, it's August or September, depending upon when your kids go back to school. Like, oh my gosh, there's people I know that their kids went back to school in July, the end of July. But whenever that season is for you, this is the time that I think we're like, okay, it's time to get back into it. Let's finish the year strong. Let's really get serious before the holidays are upon us. And I'm really pumped today to talk about email copywriting because email is such a powerful tool in messaging your audience, connecting with your audience, and your overall marketing strategy. And Jenny has some really great tips for us. So I'm excited to dive into that. And she and I connected inside of Holly's mastermind. I probably had connected with you on Instagram before that or heard you on somebody's podcast. I don't know. The longer you're in this entrepreneurial sphere, the smaller it gets and you start to forget where you connected with people. So I'm really excited to introduce you guys to her. She's an email and launch copywriter for female-founded companies and e-commerce brands, which we're going to get into that too, the difference between service-based and product-based businesses and some of the nuance there. But she's known for creating fire sales copy that people love to read and buy from, and believes that good copy does more than just make sales, but it also leaves your clients feeling excited to work with you. And her copy continues to be the backbone of several multiple figure launches for her clients. And when she isn't writing out or mapping launch strategies, she spends time biking, camping, being outdoors with her husband and 3 daughters. So Jenny, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much, Ruthie. I'm excited to be here and to get to visit with you.
Yeah. So before we dive into email copywriting, I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your background and journey, how you got into copywriting, how you got into being an online entrepreneur, and what that journey has looked like for you.
Of course. So like Ruthie said, my name is Jenny Roth and I'm an email and launch copywriter. I got into this whole online space copywriting thing. This is about my 3rd year full time, but before that I was doing it really, really part-time for a lot of years, since about 2014. My husband and I had 3 little girls, very young and right in a row. And so I was a stay-at-home mom. I always had loved writing, had a degree in Spanish and anthropology, which is like the study of people. And so I loved writing, reading people, what makes them do the things they do. I had these 3 little girls at home and I was starting to have more pockets of time in my day when they were napping. And I was like, what am I going to do in this hour of my day other than clean my house and scroll Facebook? That's what I was doing. And I just felt like I needed something more. And if that something more could also help somebody else and make me an extra $200 a month so I could put my oldest daughter in dance class and not stress about that bill, that's what I wanted to do. And so I sat down, I was like, I like to write. And so then very just boldly and a little naively, I started pitching myself to local magazines. I got a job with one as an article writer, and they paid me, I think, $50 per article, maybe $100 per article, and I was so excited. I moved my way up to being the editor of that magazine pretty quickly, working from home part-time, traveling to do interviews and stuff like that, but mostly writing, editing from home. And my favorite part of working for this community magazine was we would interview businesses and business owners. And I've lived in this area of South Dakota almost my whole life. And I would go in and talk to somebody who owns a business who I've, gone to that business for 20 years. And I had no idea, parts of their story and just everything they'd gone through and worked for and how much they did for the community and their customers. And I just couldn't believe, everybody needs to know this stuff about these businesses. And we'd write these stories in this magazine for businesses, and they'd send us thank you letters and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for that great article. We've seen an uptick in traffic since it went out. And it just floored me. I grew up, my parents are business owners. They have been my whole life. And so I just thought this was just so incredible. If I could help businesses with writing at home while with my girls, sign me up. And I realized this was called copywriting. And long story short, just dove in to learn everything I could about copywriting, pitching myself to get more business as a copywriter. And literally it has just snowballed from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it was about the writing and the connecting with humans and the storytelling. And then it became like, okay, this is actually what marketing is. Like,
Yeah.
let me dive into that. And that's so fascinating. I know my story, I started out in retail management and merchandising and sales, and people would tell me, like, you should get into marketing. And I was like, I don't know anything about marketing. I'm not trained in that. But then, like, you start to learn and you teach yourself, and then you're like, oh, okay, I get this and it makes sense and I can help other people with this. So it sounds like we had kind of some similar paths there. And it's funny you mentioned being in South Dakota because often, like, we think where we live might hold us back from what we want to do. But that's the cool thing about like the internet and online business is that you might have started with local businesses, but it can expand from there. I'm curious how you kind of niched down into serving female business owners and sometimes even e-commerce brands.
Yeah, I love this question about like niching down because I work with it with my clients a lot, and I think people struggle to find their niche. And I wish I had like a 5-point workbook for like, these are my 5 steps to finding my niche. And I don't really, the way that I figured out who I like to write for, who I best help as a copywriter, was by just doing it, trial and error. Like my first client as a copywriter, other than magazine work, I was writing podcast episodes, right? So podcast episodes for a business owner who also owned a boutique store. And, you know, I moved into blogs and websites and emails. And I mean, I've like tried everything, right? And so really like finding my niche and how I've niched to where I am is figuring out what I love to write about, like what I care about so deeply, which is like female-led businesses succeeding and e-commerce brands, because it's so fun and there's so much that you can do as an e-commerce business owner with your email list. Like the potential is like limitless there, and we've seen incredible results. So really finding my niche here has been who I love to work with, topics I'm passionate about writing, and who I've seen that I can help the most and with what medium.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
I'm like so excited to hear you say that
Yeah.
because you're right. There is no 5-step process, perfect
No.
formula. This is how you find your niche. Like the journey is different for everyone. And I think a lot of the times people say, like you hear them say, like, look around at your current clients. And when you're
Mhm.
starting out, you're like, I don't have any clients.
Mm.
I don't know. And then you
Yeah.
maybe start to get some clients and you take them on and you get different types and you're like, okay, well, one of these types is going to start to like become more prevalent and like I'll just figure it out. But and you keep trying. But I love what you said about what you enjoy and what lights you up. And like I've struggled with the same thing. I've been doing this full time for about a year, part time for about a year before that. And when I think about who I love to serve, it's like, okay, well, then that's your niche. And you don't figure that out until you take action and do the thing. And like you said, you've been doing this for full time for 3 years, but for part time and in total 9 years. And that journey, it takes the time to take the action and take the steps to figure it out. So I appreciate you sharing that because we often look around in the online space and think like everybody has it figured out. Everybody knows it's so easy for everybody else. And it takes time.
It does take time. And also for people listening to this too, just to go off of what Ruthie said there, like same with when you're in your copy. I know there's a lot of things on Instagram or wherever you're online about like you got to niche down, you got to know your niche. And I think, like you said, that can be really overwhelming to people because you're like, I don't know my niche. And so I would argue that you don't have to have this super detailed niche. Like I only help business owners making 10K and I only help them do this one thing. Like your niche can simply be when you're starting out, I help business owners write copy.
Mm-hmm.
And as you go, if you want to niche further into that, then you can, but don't let it hold you back. Don't think like you have to find the niche and then like find the clients in the business. Like just start somewhere very simply. Like a really easy way to think of your niche is like pain point or an adjective and the person, right? So I help busy moms, right? I
Yeah.
help overwhelmed virtual assistants, like whatever, and then just roll with it and your niche will come the more you help
Yes.
people. Yeah.
Yes. And I think the same is true for product-based businesses. And I can speak to that from experience from being a marketing director for a retailer in that people can buy stuff anywhere. Like there's billions of places that people can go buy stuff. And so if you're trying to sell to all of the people, it starts to feel like, well, nobody's listening. And so when we start to figure out, okay, it's A, not about the stuff, it's about the person, the customer, and B, who is that customer? The copy starts to resonate and it starts to build those relationships and nurture. And I learned all of this from branding, marketing, whatever, doing network marketing and like teaching myself. But I was learning a lot of service-based business best practices and applying them to the product-based business space and realizing that there was some parallels there. And so I would love to kind of get your insights or your input on the differences and the similarities that you see in copywriting for e-commerce versus a service-based business.
Good. So what I've seen with working with my product-based business clients is a couple of things. And I think we can see this in like big brands too. Like if you look at a huge brand, I'm a runner, I'll just say like Nike, like a big sports brand, any like huge brand, they're bringing in more and more like faces to that, whether that's athletes or personal brands or influencers into their marketing. And so when I'm writing for a product-based business, we are really emails, social, wherever we're writing copy for them, I almost come at it like they're a personal brand and with the belief that customers also want to know the person behind the brand, right? So it's not all about, so one of my main product-based business clients, she has like a candle company and it's incredibly successful, like candles, home fragrances, wall diffusers, all of this. And she lives on a farm in Iowa and she shares so much. We share so much with her customers and her client base about her work on the farm, right? Like the cattle, but also like she's from Iowa. And so like they grow soybeans on her farm and her candles are made out of soybean, like soy, you know? So like we really incorporate stories of her personal life. Like, why does this fragrance have this name? Well, it's because it reminds her of being like growing up as a 4-H kid and being in the barn with her dad. And we like tell this story and we share like all of these things. And so I would say that's one parallel is product-based e-commerce businesses. I think there's like a blend of like you want to be found like SEO, right? So we're using like a lot of like really, you can almost seem kind of like dry language. And I think that's okay sometimes if you're like looking for organic, being found like an SEO, but also like I feel like the more of your personality and story and the why behind everything you do that you can bring into it, it will help you stand out so much. Because think about how many business, like product-based businesses you buy from that you don't know that stuff about. And if you got to know them better, like, I don't know, it just adds that human element. You're not just trying to sell them something. You're like, hey, I'm a person, this is my business, and here, like, this is how I can help, you know?
Yeah. And your point about Nike, because my background is in the fitness space. And so we would look at Nike all the time. It's like, well, what are they doing? What's the example? Like, no, they're not telling you, like, Phil Knight is not in the commercials. But they're using humans and human stories to connect to the customer. And when you look at like they're in chapter 100 of their business journey, if not like 1,000. And if you're in chapter 10, no, your storytelling and your marketing is going to look different. But how can you learn, to your point, the trends and the way they're connecting with the customers? And I know a lot of times product-based businesses, they're like, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about me. And I think even your point about your customer and sharing her behind the scenes story, it's not about her. It's about resonating and connecting. The farm, the soybean fields, the this, the that. Like there's users out there that are like, yes, me too. That's me too. I grew up on a farm too. But when you don't share that stuff and you just share like, here's a candle, you don't have those opportunities to build that relationship.
Couldn't agree more. And I know it's like whether you have a product-based business or a service, like whatever your business, it is hard to like put your face and your stories out there. So I understand the hesitation completely, and it's so normal. Like everybody feels that way. Like no one wants to hear about me. But if you're listening to this and you're thinking that, like, test it and see.
Mm-hmm.
You won't know unless you try, right? Like, you can listen to this episode and me telling you, like, tell the story behind your product, share your values, share why this matters, share why you invented it. Talk about, I mean, in her email list, just for this example with a candle making company, we share about her employees
Mm-hmm.
and why they love each fragrance and who invented this fragrance. I mean, like, we share so much behind the scenes and storytelling within her brand. And it's so cool.
And
So if I just try it and see,
yeah, and I'm curious to hear that when you say that, try it and see, because I
Mm-hmm.
get a lot of people that will say like, well, I tried it and it didn't work. Well,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it didn't work yet. Like
Yeah.
how long? And I coach people on like, let's try something for 90 days. Let's see how it moves the needle over 90 days. Because if we like send one email of like the founder's story and then assume our sales to double the next day, like that's not realistic. But when we
Mm-hmm.
start to sprinkle those things in, plant those seeds, water those seeds, we're like all about the farm analogies today.
Yeah.
um then you're going to start to see the results down the road, right?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. And so just specifically for product-based businesses and like emailing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So get into a rhythm where you are sending a couple emails every week. Yeah, I agree with Ruthie. Try it for 90 days. Track those emails, like track your subject line, your open rate, your click rate. Depending on what email software provider you use, you can even track the sales made in each email. But know that it's not just like, and it can be every now and then, right? Like once a month, you can come in with just like a more like, here's our founder story. We just wanted you to know,
Mm-hmm.
reply if this resonated with you. You can come in with that. But I also want to make it really clear that we're not just like sending out like, here's the owner's top five, favorite, I don't know, fall cardigans just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're using storytelling and brand awareness, but we always are very intentional. Like we have a call to action on it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So the product is the call to action with it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're testing something out, know that you don't just have to be like, so I think some people can come in and be like, well, what do I share then about my personal life? And just start sharing like all these things and then like crossing your fingers that it makes somebody connect with you and they buy from you down the road. Like you don't really have control over that, right? If
Yeah.
someone buys or not. But always, whenever you're putting something out there, to have that call to action behind it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that will help sales as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the other thing that I was thinking about from a product-based business versus a service-based business, product-based businesses have the luxury of new arrivals or seasonal calendars for product launches, which can really help put some frameworks around your marketing calendar. And service based businesses, often, if they're coming out with a new offer, they have that. But somebody who's maybe been in business a couple years, or they've got a defined offer suite, or they're not launching anything new, it can be like, well, how do I talk about this stuff? Because I see all this coaching about launching. I'm not launching. I do this all the time. Any tips for kind of how to use copywriting and particularly email when you're not launching?
Yeah, such a good question. So I think of launch, whenever someone says launch, for me, that's just like a fancy word for a promotion, right? So if you're in business, unless your calendar is completely full for the next 90 days, 6 months, or a year, you probably are promoting something or wishing to make sales on an offer. So your launch can be evergreen, which means the cart is always open. You can sign up anytime. Or your launch can be cart open close, which means you have a week to sign up and then the cart closes and then we reopen it next month or quarter, whatever. So just to kind of reshape your thoughts around what is a launch, if unless your calendar again is completely full, like you're probably promoting or looking to make sales on an offer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing like if you're a service provider, or you have like an evergreen membership course in your offer suite that's always open. What I do for myself and for my clients is I break things into a quarter and I think, what do I want to book out this quarter? And you can even go smaller scale, just do a month at a time if that's easier for you, however your planning works. And I think, what service do I want to fill my calendar with for these next 90 days? And I'm going to promote it as if I'm launching it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm going to be emailing about it. It's going to be my call to action. I'm going to be answering questions about it. I'm going to be sharing client case studies and reviews. I'm going to be thinking about objections and handling all that. So I'm always kind of treating it as if I'm in a launch, even though it's not like cart open, cart close. Like it's kind of always. And then after that, time frame, that 90 days, maybe it's another service or offer and you move on, right? So to answer that question is, you can always be promoting your stuff in email list. It doesn't have to be cart open, cart close.
Yeah. And from a marketing perspective, it's even about just like campaigns around those offers, or it can be seasonal campaigns. And like an example I think about is like, let's say like a therapist. You're not necessarily, I mean, maybe your calendar's full, to your point, and you're just nurturing for when it's not full. But like, let's say your calendar's not full and you want to take on some more clients. Well, you have one offer. Your offer is therapy. Like you're going to sign up for hourly therapy, but you can create campaigns around what people might be dealing with based upon this time of year. And so putting those frameworks in place on your calendar, which is why like we're in September when this airs, I advocate for like in September, October, November, pencil out your year. Pencil, not pen, because it can change as the world or your business changes, but pencil it out, because then you have an idea when you sit down to plan, versus like every month or every quarter or every week being like, well, what am I going to talk about now? I'm so bored of sending emails. I've said the same thing 10,000 times. How many more times can I say it? You've got different angles to take on it.
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
It's such a good point.
Yeah. And it is hard when you are talking about your own marketing and you're doing your own copywriting. It can feel like I have said the same thing 1,000 times. People are going to get sick of it. How do you kind of like coach to that pushback? I mean, I know what I tell people, but like what's kind of your thought process on that when people are like, they're going to get sick of hearing from me?
Yeah. It's such a normal thought to be worried that you are going to be bothering people. They're going to be sick of hearing from you, that you're annoying them, that they're going to unsubscribe if we're talking about emails. So I always tell people like it's so normal. Like I don't know anybody in the world who doesn't worry about that stuff. And I always come back to the thought, but there is at least one, and there's more than one, but there is at least one person out there on your email list, following you on Instagram or wherever you're promoting your things, that wants to hear from you. So we're going to write to that person,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And I've always been kind of taught to like writing from that energy, like you're writing for that reader. There's always one, right? And you're not writing for the people who are annoyed or unsubscribing or whatever, if those people really exist. That's not who you're out here taking care of. You're taking care of the one person who needs it out there to hear you. And I've always kind of also heard from coaches in the copywriting space too, like if you're not sick of your offer, if you're not sick of talking about your offer, you're not talking about it enough. So I kind of remind myself about that too. Like it just means I'm doing my job. It just means I'm being consistent and I'm talking for the one person who just needs to hear it this one way I haven't said it yet. And it really just holding that belief and writing from that place.
Yeah, I coach to the exact same thing. If you're not sick of talking about yourself or your offer, people they don't know. But I love the mindset shift of writing to one person. And I think once we've niched down, or even while we're trying to figure that out, like we might have that ideal client avatar in our mind for who the offer's for, or who we want to serve, or who we can help. But when you sit down to write that email, to even be like, who am I talking to in this email? And what are they struggling with or thinking about right now? And actually, I was just reading an email from somebody the other day, and they started like, hey guys, like, no, there's no guys reading the email. One person is reading this email, right?
Such a good point. Yeah. For me, just putting myself in that position of just thinking like I just have to talk to one person, and I will literally imagine like somebody I would like, if I'm writing about my copywriting services, I will literally imagine somebody who I would love to write for, like that I'm writing this for them, right? And if I'm writing for a client, I imagine like their ideal client. And it's not just imagining, right? It's like gathering the market research to know who this person is and what their wants are, and how your offer like solves their problems, and literally just writing to them how I would talk to them, how I would explain something to them if they called me up and said, hey Jenny, I'm interested in a sales page, tell me about it. Right? So like just writing how you would speak to a person if they were having a cup of coffee with you at a across your desk. that really does help me.
Yeah, and it's normal to know that, let's say you've not been regularly emailing
Mm-hmm.
and now you start doing it more frequently. Like let's say you do have a launch and you
Mm-hmm.
ramp up your emails, whether they're nurture emails or sales emails or a combination of the two, you're going to get unsubscribes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. Like, I remember having a conversation with a client and she was like, I talked to so and so on who I know is on my email list, and she told me it's too much. I'm emailing too much. I'm like, then she's not your person. It's okay. It's okay. Like, but because to your point, there's that one person on your list who needs to hear about it again.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And again, it's so normal. Like we all have those stories, right? Where like somebody, whether it's a friend or maybe even an employee, will be like, "Oh, your emails are too salesy," or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and you just think, "Oh my gosh, I'm just bothering these people," but you're not bothering the person who wants to buy from you,
Yeah.
right? They want to know. So being clear and consistent in talking about your offer is like it's kind. I always tell this story. I had a past client on my email list who I wrote custom copy for her. She was on my email list and she unsubscribed. And I was like, so I was just heartbroken. I've annoyed her. She, you know what I mean? She liked me. Now she doesn't. And then like 6 months later, she emailed me for another project. Like she just did what she didn't need what I had to offer right then. And then when she did, she came back, So it's just like you never really know. And email metrics show you things like unsubscribes. You'll see your unsubscribes, right? But what you don't see is the person, you might see their email address, but what you don't see is the one person who's consistently reading your emails at their desk being like, yeah, okay. And then you send another one and they're like,
Yes.
yeah, right. Like
Yes.
you don't get to see that, but that is happening
Yes,
too,
and the same thing goes, I will say, for those of you who do podcasts, the same thing goes for podcast listeners. You
Mm-hmm.
get, yes, you see the metrics of how many downloads there were.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you might have a call to action and you're like, nobody followed up or
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. But then that one person says, like, I've been listening to your podcast for a year and I'm so
Yeah.
excited to work with you. Like, you had no idea
Yes.
that that was going on.
I know. I'd even argue that the people who want to work with you, they're not like liking your stuff or like replying like you said. They'll come out of left field like that so often, be like, "Hey, I've followed you here. I heard you on this podcast, and I heard you on this podcast, and I think you're the copywriter, whatever you do that I want to work with." And you're like, "Wow."
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
They're
And
there.
I just had a podcast conversation with my friend Brittany, who's going to be on the show, and she was sharing a story about how she's a LinkedIn expert
Oh,
and career
cool.
coach, and she was telling a story about how she had met somebody at an event like 3 years ago. The person followed her on LinkedIn, consumed her content, and then 3 years later, that person was in a position that they needed her services and reached out and was like, "Hey, I met you at this event 3 years ago. I'd like to work with you." She's like, "I had no idea that I was continuing to serve that person." And they reached out of the blue. So you really never know. And so it goes back to that, like, planting seeds and watering them and knowing that they will harvest. You just don't know when.
Exactly. Oh,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, these were all really, really interesting. I think just thought provoking things to help us think about our copy differently. And to your point, like, copy is so incredibly important. And one last thing I want to address is AI and Chat GPT, because we all know in the marketing world, like, it's taking over. But I know I can say from my perspective that yes, it's incredible and it can help you with a lot of things, but it's not a human that can make those little connections and those little, like, nuances. And so my question for you is, like, as a writer, what do you love about Chat GPT, and what is it like you're like, but it can't quite do this?
Yes. Yeah. So this is crazy, but I know when like AI came out, Chat GPT came out, I think as a writer I was supposed to panic or something, but to be like completely honest with you, I just kept moving forward and my like copywriting coaches use it and they're like, "Jen, you need to get on there because you can get prompts that will get you started and then you can come in with what you know about how to add the messaging and the tone and the sales angles. You can come in with the prompts that you give AI and it'll save you time, right? So the only thing I know is that what I've been told is that if you and I know a lot of copywriters who are like experimenting with like, what's the best prompt to tell the chat GPT or AI, so I can get, these results out of it. I don't know that stuff, but what I am hearing is that like you can use it to get started and then bring in all the things that it might not know, like the voice of customer data, the personality of the brand you're writing for, different sales, messaging angles, persuasion, conversion techniques, all that stuff. So my thought on it is if it saves you time and gives you a place to start, go for it, because there's nothing worse than like that blank page of just like not even knowing where to start. So if it like gives you some place to start, it's not cheating and it's not bad, like 1,000% do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, and knowing the expectation that like it's a computer and it is scraping the internet for information. And so what you put in is also going to determine what you get out. So if you don't know your brand tone of voice, you don't know your brand values, you don't know your mission, you don't know your offer promise, and you don't tell it that, it can't tell you. Like it might be able to help you put language to it of like, okay, and I can share that this is something that I've done, is I'll go in and be like, okay, I'm going to brain dump a bunch of information. Now, assume you are a brand strategist, give me back a, summary of the ideal customer or something like that. But I have to do the inputting. And for some people, that inputting and that pulling those details out of your brand is so hard to do for yourself. And that's where working with a writer or a strategist or a brand coach or a business coach or whatever can be just incredibly valuable, because they can see things that you can't on your own.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, this was a really fun conversation. I've got 3 final questions just to get to know you a little bit more that I always like to ask our guests to connect with you. And on the Consistency Corner podcast, and we just chatted about it a second ago, of what you need to be able to tell AI is about your brand values. And so I would love to know, what's one of your brand values and how did you land on that?
Gosh. Oh, so good. One of my brand values is that all women, no matter their circumstances or where they live in the world, should be able to pursue their dreams and make an income for themselves. And I landed on that brand value because I have daughters, because I'm a woman in the world, because when I was a young person, I worked a lot. I went to school for Spanish, and I worked in a lot of programs for migrant women who were working very hard. And I just thought, like, why do I have the opportunity to go to college and do things and other people don't? And I've never understood that.
Yeah.
Right. Like, one woman, no matter where she lives, but like on the other side of the world, because she's in a refugee camp or in a war zone, can't do things that I can do. Right. So, so ways that we give back to that mission are we donate to some of the women's shelters here in the reservations in South Dakota, and also give back just to other programs that uplift women. And so, yeah, that's just one of my values, and why I love to write for female-led businesses as well, is because I'm just passionate about that women should be able to have a dream and be able to take care of themselves financially, no matter where they come from.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you're using your business to support that value through giving back and then through the clients that you serve, because then everything feels so aligned, because it's something that really matters to you and you value.
Yeah.
One of my brand values that we talk a lot about here is personal development and growth mindset. And so I always love to ask our guests, what is one of your favorite personal development books? Or if you can't pick a favorite, what is one that you've read recently that really resonated with you?
Few. And these are kind of writing related. So one is called The Artist's Way, and I will have to look up her name. It's Julia or Julie. It's just so beautiful. Whether you consider yourself an artist or not, she helps you to really like basically find what you're meant to do and to like get out of your own way, even if what you want to do is something like, air quotes, fluffy, like write plays or be a musician, right? So I just love that book so much. I go through it, like I'm always going through it. There's exercises in there. That's one of my favorites. There's also a really great book called Wild Women, Wild Voices. Again, I don't have the author's name off the top of my head, but it's just such a beautiful read for any woman just to discover herself a little bit better.
I love that. And that's something that I think as an entrepreneur, you get into this whole thing around personal branding and what you stand for, that like discovering yourself and what matters to you,
Mm.
that's a process in and of itself. And so many of us, we've been raised to be people pleasers or to try to fit in, and you tune out your own voice and what
Yeah.
matters to you. And so that's like a whole exercise. And so that's
Hmm.
cool that there's a book that has resonated, that like has supported you with that. Well, my
Thank you.
last question is, because we are the consistency corner and we talk about consistency, is I'd love to know something that you are really consistent with, either in your business or your personal life, that you are
Mhm.
proud of.
Yeah. Oh, I love this because I want to be more proud of it. My coach is always like, you need to celebrate that. And I'm like, oh. So consistently, I'm a runner. I consistently run and exercise. I'm very proud of myself for that. My personal life, I am consistently here for my kids. Very proud of that. For work, I consistently have writing blocks, which is like the hardest work of the day for me is the writing of the work. So I have blocks, so I'm consistently doing that. And I figure if I can do those things, then I just feel better. And I also consistently, this is new, consistently like meditate twice a day, which is totally new for me and really annoyed me at first for anybody listening who thinks that's woo woo. But I am proud of myself for sticking with it, and I have seen the benefits of it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's interesting that you said the writing blocks, because
Mm,
as a mom,
yeah.
kids, all the responsibilities, all the
Mhm.
things that,
No.
like, to have blocks of time to
Yeah.
create is like invaluable. I mean, just last night, like my son, we're in, summer. We don't have summer camp. We've got 5 more days till school starts, like hallelujah. But it's
Mhm.
loud in my house. And so last night after he went to bed, like I stayed up and worked for like an hour and a half. And I was like,
Wow.
well, 11:30 me is going to be really mad at 7 a.m. me. But like, gosh, that
Mhm.
hour and a half of silence to work was so helpful, because those blocks of time, we can't always create in 15-minute pockets. We need those bigger blocks.
Yeah. It's so hard when the kids are home. I feel
Mm-hmm.
you. It's just different. You just do what you can.
Yeah, you do what
Yeah.
you can, and you give yourself grace, and
Hmm.
know that like it's not always going to be like this. There will be other times that you can shift and
Yes.
grow and progress. So, Jenny, this was such a fun conversation. Tell our listeners where they can connect with you, how they can learn more, if they like to get in touch.
Oh, thank you, Ruthie. Yeah, so I'm at jennyrothcopywriting.com, and that's where you can find me on Instagram too, is at jennyrothcopywriting. I think one of the best ways to get to know me is I have email insiders, which is $8 a month. You get a new email newsletter template every week. And we also do like launch email sequences every quarter, and we do copywriting like feedback on your emails. I'll critique it and give you a review on it, and we do copywriting classes once a month too.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. And this was such a fun conversation.
Yes, thank you.